The snow was still deep when Kara Harrison vanished from the log house on the edge of the forest in Kenai, Alaska. Population 7,512. On New Year's Eve 2008, the season's first major storm swept across the coast, plunging the town into darkness and dropping temperatures to -20 degrees. Around 10 p.m., the Harrisons' neighbor, Mildred Crane, saw the glow of the fireplace through the kitchen window as the 13-year-old girl crossed the yard, cradling her small cat and wearing the purple sweater her mother had just knitted for her. That was the last time anyone saw Kara. The next morning, the back door stood wide open, and on the snow-covered ground there was only a single line of small footprints leading straight into the white-shrouded forest. What happened that stormy night would haunt Kenai for more than a decade afterward. Before we dive deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss the latest cases. Winter 2008, Kenai, a small town on the shores of Cook Inlet, Alaska, was buried under the season's first blizzard. The sky was sealed shut by a thick layer of slate-gray clouds, wind screamed through the pines along the roads, and the temperature fell so low you could no longer feel your own breath. On the outskirts of town, the Harrison family's log house sat swallowed by the white expanse. The faint light from an oil lamp in the kitchen was the only thing holding back the pitch-black night. Mark Harrison, a mechanic at the port yard, was checking the generator while his wife Evelyn straightened thick blankets for their two daughters. 13-year-old Kara and 10-year-old Krista were close but total opposites. Kara was quiet, loved drawing and reading. Krista was energetic and always outside throwing snowballs. When the power grid flickered and finally died, Evelyn called the girls to the fireplace, but Kara lingered by the window where snowflakes clung thick to the glass. Outside, the wind howled in waves, and branches whipping against the roof sounded like someone knocking. For a split second, Evelyn thought she saw a shadow moving in the white void of the yard, but when she pulled the curtain aside, there was only snow. That night, the entire town was practically paralyzed by the storm. Inside the log house, the only sounds were the wind and the crackling fireplace. The next morning, when Mark woke up, the sky was already light from the reflection off the deep snow. He stepped out of the bedroom and immediately sensed the unnatural silence. The back door was ajar. A blast of frigid air rushed in, swirling snow across the kitchen floor. Kara's bed was empty, blankets spilled onto the floor. Evelyn ran through the house calling her name. Krista stood frozen in the doorway, tears streaming. Whether from the cold or fear, no one could tell. On the porch snow, a single line of small footprints led away and gradually faded in the wind. No one knew where Kara had gone, and in that cold, every passing minute could mean the difference between life and death. Trembling, Evelyn picked up the landline, dialed 911, and choked out that her daughter was missing. On the other end, the 911 dispatcher stayed calm, asking for every detail: victim's name, age, last seen time, current family status. The information was quickly logged and forwarded to the Alaska State Troopers station covering Kenai. Outside, wind gusts whipped snow into blinding white walls, causing radio signals to cut in and out. Less than 20 minutes later, 2 AST patrol trucks appeared at the turnoff to the Harrison driveway, their headlights cutting pale beams through the ice-covered world. Lead investigator James Delaney, a veteran of missing persons cases in frozen wilderness, stepped out of the first vehicle. He took a deep breath, scanned the scene, and immediately noticed skid marks in the snow on the steps and the back door hanging slightly open, hinges rattling in the wind. No signs of forced entry, no pry marks or scratches, but on the soft snow were clear, small footprints mixed with larger adult boot prints and a faint drag mark heading toward the forest. Delaney measured distances, flagged locations, and ordered the crime scene team to stop and photograph the entire area with high-resolution cameras. Inside the house, the atmosphere was frozen with tension. Krista sat motionless, wrapped in a blanket, eyes wide with fear. Evelyn clutched her younger daughter's hand, crying while trying to recall everything she could. Mark stood behind them, hands clasped, face ashen. Delaney opened his notebook and questioned each family member: time of the blackout, bedtime, any unusual sounds during the night. No one remembered anything beyond the wind and branches scraping the roof. Kara's room was examined first: bed neatly made, window securely closed, desk with an open book, coat and old socks still on the chair. On the floor, a few melted snowflakes near the hallway door. Delaney stepped to the back door, touched the damp wood with his pen, and noticed a thin layer of fresh snow already covering the prints. He marked the area and told technicians to collect snow and soil samples from beneath the steps for trace evidence. Outside, patrol units strung caution tape around the property and placed reflective stakes in a 100-meter perimeter. Local search and rescue was called in. A topographic map of Kenai was spread across a truck hood. Officers marked the Harrison house, wind direction, and the two main trails into the forest. Delaney assigned one team to sweep directly behind the house, a second to check the frozen river to the south, and a third to watch the main road in case the victim had wandered off. Everyone agreed time was critical. In -20-degree cold, a child couldn't survive long outdoors. As the teams prepared to move out, Delaney gave the family a brief reassurance that the search was starting immediately. He took one last look around. Everything inside was tidy. No signs of burglary or struggle. Only an odd empty space between a chair and the back door, where blown snow formed a faint outline, as if someone had stood there for a while. He jotted it down, capped his pen, and stepped outside where the wind screamed through the pines, and fresh snow was already covering the morning's first footprints. Delaney glanced at the solid gray sky, realizing the weather was turning worse faster than forecast. He signaled the techs to pack up equipment and radioed headquarters for additional search teams. Less than an hour later, the full mobilization alert went out across Kenai. Rescue units deployed that same morning as snow buried the roads and gusts shook power poles. 2 snowmobile ski units from the Kenai station were sent along with a K-9 team specialized in deep cold missing persons. James Delaney joined the first group himself, carrying the marked topo map from the Harrison scene. Outside temperatures were below -20. Breath froze into thick clouds. Radio contact came and went. They moved slowly in single file, each person carrying high-powered flashlights and planting reflective stakes that disappeared under accumulating snow within minutes. The initial trail led north into the forest where wind poured straight off Cook Inlet. Fresh snow had erased nearly all older prints, leaving only faint depressions like black dots on white. The K-9, a dog named Rook, was given slack on his lid. Nose low, he worked in wide half-circles around the depressions. After a few minutes, he stopped, barked hoarsely, then stared toward the forest, tail straight up. Delaney raised a fist. Everyone froze while forensics photographed and sampled the snow. 300 meters deeper, the terrain dropped. Trees grew dense, branches sagging under heavy snow. Wind through the canopy made a low, constant roar. One of the officers at the rear called forward about a long compression mark, like something had been dragged across crusted snow. Delaney knelt, shone his light. The snow was packed hard and mixed with a few dark flecks, dirt or pine resin. He ordered samples taken and marked the spot. Rook kept tracking north, crossing a low swale. There the dog suddenly froze, nose pressed to the snow, then began digging furiously. A technician shoveled cautiously and quickly uncovered something metallic glinting under thin ice. Delaney brushed snow away with his gloved hand and revealed a broken thin silver chain with a heart pendant engraved. He immediately sealed it in an evidence bag, photographed it, and logged. Evidence hash, 1, silver necklace. North Forest, approx. 1.2 kilometers from Harrison residence. The team stood silent for several seconds. Only the wind howled through their headsets. The necklace was placed in an insulated metal case to prevent freezing. As they fanned out to search the surrounding area, the weather turned violently worse. Wind surged, visibility collapsed. Huge clumps of snow crashed from branches, burying the ground in minutes. Radio crackled with word from command that another storm front was closing fast, and all teams were ordered back before winds reached dangerous levels. Delaney signaled retreat. The lead pair broke trail, while the rest followed with the dog and gear. Moving against the wind through forest that had already lost most morning markers, reflective stakes were buried, only bits of flagging tape visible in the blizzard. It took nearly an hour to reach open ground and follow the main road back to the command post. By the time they arrived, the sky was black, wind screaming, vehicles completely white. All outdoor search operations were suspended for safety. Delaney leaned against a truck, pulled off his gloves, and stared at the snow-covered evidence bag. In his hand, the silver necklace still caught a faint gleam against the whiteout, the only thing left carrying the image of the missing girl, as the wilderness closed in again. When the blizzard eased the next morning, Alaska State Troopers shifted focus to canvassing residents near the Harrison home. James Delaney split his teams and went house to house within a 2-kilometer radius, knocking on doors to record anything heard or seen the night of the disappearance. Most residents said zero visibility on December 31st kept them indoors all night. However, 3 people on the main road leading to the forest reported seeing vehicle headlights moving on the north side road shortly before midnight. An elderly man named Harold Green, who lived less than half a mile from the Harrisons, remembered hearing a truck engine rev, pause, then accelerate away. A young woman named Linda Pruitt said that while clearing snow from her chimney pipe in the backyard, she saw a white beam sweep across her wall like a flashlight or headlights. Police noted exact locations, light direction, and approximate times based on each witness's clock. All statements aligned between 10:30 p.m. and 11:15 p.m. Delaney entered the data into his master log and requested traffic camera footage from the Sterling Highway junction, though he knew blizzard conditions made usable images unlikely. Meanwhile, technicians pulled records of every vehicle that had entered the area during the last week of December, focusing on small utility trucks or RVs authorized for power line maintenance during the storm. The list quickly narrowed to 4 individuals, including Thomas Selden, a mobile technician temporarily based in Kenai to service residential generators. Delaney recalled Mark Harrison mentioning that Selden had stopped by a few days earlier to check their generator. That detail was starred in red in the temporary file. Another team was sent to verify Selden's registered routes, cross-referencing weather reports and fuel purchases at the nearest gas station. By midday, all data was compiled at the temporary command post, area-wide blackout, at approximately 9:45 p.m. Harrison family went to bed around 10 p.m. Kara was the last one still awake. Storm intensified around 10:30 p.m., followed by neighbor reports of vehicle lights. A provisional timeline was drawn on the whiteboard, 9:45 p.m. Power outage, 10 p.m. Family to bed, 10:30 p.m. Truck headlights sighted, 11 p.m. Strange engine noise reported, 6 a.m. Disappearance discovered. Delaney reviewed the board, underlined points that matched weather logs, and circled the unexplained 45-minute gap. He ordered copies made of everyone known to be in the area on December 31st and created a relationship diagram focusing on mobile utility workers, people whose vehicles could legally move during storm road closures. By late afternoon, as light snow began falling again, Delaney gathered all notes, instructed technicians to file every statement and dataset under case number 08KH12, and prepared for the next phase of analysis. 2 days after the blizzard cleared, the Kenai sky brightened again, with thin streaks of cloud stretching across the horizon. The temperature remained below zero but stable enough for the forensics team to return to the Harrison property and complete evidence collection. James Delaney arrived at dawn with 3 forensic technicians and 2 crime scene officers, carrying cameras, refrigerated evidence kits, and trace evidence tools. The snow had refrozen into a hard crust, making it harder to locate the original search grid. The reflective stakes placed before the storm were still in place, though some spray paint markers had been blurred by wind. Delaney had the team sweep 5-meter squares, working outward from the back porch to the fence line. Just below the back steps, a technician crouched close to the ground, used an ice knife to scrape away fresh snow, and uncovered a small piece of purple fabric, thick wool with frayed edges. He measured the location, photographed it, and labeled it Exhibit #2. A few steps away, near the base of the wooden stairs, a long hair was stuck to a metal railing by the wind. Light brown, about 20 centimeters long, possibly female. The technician lifted it with tweezers, placed it in a vial, sealed it, and recorded the coordinates. As the team moved toward the tree line, Delaney noticed a small dark oval stain on the frozen snow surface. He signaled a stop, touched a thermometer to it. The thin ice layer above was slightly cloudy, with a brownish tint beneath. A clean steel blade scooped the sample into an insulated bag, labeled Exhibit #4, suspected blood. Every collection point was precisely measured from the back door and added to the master site diagram. Inside the house, the interior team rechecked Kara's room for secondary fabric fibers or blood traces that might have blown in with the snow. On the floor, they found several small damp spots that differed in color from meltwater. These were sampled separately. Delaney logged everything and cross-referenced it with photos from the first response. By midday, collection was complete. 8 sealed items in total. A purple fabric scrap, a hair, 2 snow samples suspected of containing blood, a patch of wet soil, and a dark thread stuck to the door handle. Everything was packed into a temperature-controlled transport case and rushed to the Anchorage Police Crime Lab in a refrigerated vehicle, maintaining 10 degrees Celsius. Before leaving the scene, Delaney revisited the wooded area where the necklace had been found. The ice layer had thickened, but the location was still clearly marked. He took a new series of panoramic photos, then had the team reseal the area and post no entry signs until further notice. When finished, he stood looking at the small log house, the back door still fluttering with yellow crime scene tape in the cold wind. In his duty log, he wrote the final entry for that day: evidence collection complete, scene stable, awaiting Anchorage lab results. That same afternoon, after the evidence team wrapped up, James Delaney returned to the temporary command post to review the list of everyone known to have been near the Harrison house on the day of the disappearance. Among them, the name Thomas Selden was circled in red, a freelance electrical technician who had visited the Harrison home 3 days earlier to service the generator and now lived in an old RV parked on a lot near the Sterling Highway. A summons was issued that afternoon, and the next morning Selden appeared at the Kenai station. He was about 40, with messy hair, patchy beard, and a gaunt face from cold and lack of sleep. When he entered the interview room, he seemed calm, his gaze distant, as if the matter didn't concern him. Delaney began with routine questions: occupation, current address, reason for staying in Kenai. Selden said he had arrived in the area the previous month, doing contract generator maintenance for several homes, including the Harrisons. On the night of the blizzard, he claimed to have left town early to avoid road closures and slept in a truck stop parking lot more than 30 kilometers away. He provided a detailed timeline and insisted he never returned to the Harrison property after finishing the repair. Delaney took notes and occasionally watched the man's hands. Fingers interlaced, thumbs rubbing lightly, an almost hidden sign of tension. When asked whether he had seen or heard anything about the missing girl, Selden only shrugged and said he had read about it in the morning paper. After nearly an hour, Delaney shifted to the vehicle search. Selden's RV was towed to the station yard for examination. Inside was a mess: a fold-down bed, toolboxes, empty beer cans, and assorted personal items. Technicians logged a 25 centimeters hunting knife with a worn steel blade and old leather sheath, a pair of black leather gloves beside the driver's seat, and a brown leather jacket hanging on a hook with dark machine oil stains on the sleeves. All 3 items were sealed, photographed, and swabbed for quick tests. Preliminary results: no blood, no biological traces. Nothing else appeared suspicious beyond a few old maps and an expired utility ID badge. Asked about the knife, Selden said it was for chopping firewood and self-defense on long trips. The gloves were for outdoor work, and the jacket had oil stains from a generator repair the day before. His answers matched his job and contained no contradictions. Cell phone records were useless. The entire area had lost signal during the storm. A check of the nearest gas station confirmed Selden had filled up on the morning of January 1st, consistent with his statement. Samples from the RV were sent to Anchorage for detailed testing, but there was insufficient cause for detention. After nearly 3 hours, Delaney looked straight at Selden, searching for any abnormal reaction, but saw only deep-set cold eyes, showing neither fear nor defensiveness. At the end, Selden signed the interview record and left the room with slow steps. Delaney stayed behind, flipping through his notes. No signs of violence, no direct evidence, only a vague, uneasy feeling. He wrote the final line: insufficient grounds for charges, remain on watch. Case File 08KH12 was moved to temporary monitoring status with a note to update if anything new surfaced regarding the vehicle or Thomas Selden. 3 days after questioning Thomas Selden, search operations resumed when the weather cleared and visibility improved. Temperatures were still low, but the wind had dropped, allowing rescue teams to extend the search to the banks of the Kenai River, where half-frozen water flowed along the northern tree line. James Delaney directed the effort in person, leading 2 K9 teams and a group of local divers along 3 axes: forest trails, the rocky riverbank, and low ground near the old wooden bridge. GPS marked every location, and reflective stakes were placed for future reference. The first team moved along the west bank through thick willow brush where snow was deep and ice was beginning to break into thin sheets. One of the dogs suddenly stopped, barked hoarsely, and turned toward the water. Delaney approached and saw something pale blue protruding from the snow. He gently brushed the surface with a probe and uncovered a child's thick-knit mitten. The cuff had white stitching and a plastic star button. Forensics confirmed the size fit a child aged roughly 12 to 14. The mitten was sealed, photographed in place, and logged as the next exhibit. The team continued searching the immediate area, hand-shoveling small patches, but found nothing more. Early that afternoon, the second team radioed an anomaly on the rocky bank about 1 kilometer downstream. Delaney moved to the location, following the line of reflective markers. Most of the riverbank rocks were snow-covered, only a few smooth slabs exposed. On one large rock near the water's edge, a brownish stain showed through the white ice. Delaney wiped away the thin snow layer and revealed a faint, dried blood smear along the crevices. A technician carefully scraped samples with a blade, then covered the spot with a windproof shield to preserve trace evidence. There were no fresh boot prints, only half-filled depressions in the snow. Measurements showed the bloodstain was roughly 2 meters from the water on a gentle slope, consistent with a fall or being dragged. The river surface was almost completely iced over, making underwater flow impossible to determine. The dive team ran sonar, but low light and sub-zero temperatures made diving too risky. Delaney conferred with the rescue leader and limited underwater scanning to 10 meters from shore. 4 consecutive sonar sweeps detected no unusual objects. As evening approached, wind picked up again from the bay, signaling a new low-pressure system. Delaney checked the time, weighing the risk of losing evidence against team safety, and ordered the entire riverbank marked with warning signs and red stakes at evidence locations. All samples, the mitten, rock scrapings, and blood-tainted snow, were sealed and transported to cold storage at the command post. As the group pulled out, snow began falling again, covering the trail within minutes. Snowmobile engines faded weakly into the wind. At the Kenai station that evening, Delaney closed the daily report. No body located, deteriorating weather, expanded search phase terminated. Outside, the sky had turned lead gray, snow drifted lazily over the river, erasing the last traces of the day's effort. In the 3 months following the riverbank operation, the Kara Harrison missing person case saw virtually no further progress. Lab results from Anchorage confirmed that all collected samples were too small and too degraded by extreme cold to yield complete DNA profiles. The purple fabric and child's mitten contained no usable biological material. The blood on the riverbank rock was confirmed human but insufficient to determine sex or identity. A summary report returned to Kenai in early March classified the case as missing person, cause unknown, no specific evidence of criminal activity. Meanwhile, expanded interviews with area residents produced no new leads. Many people had left town after the long winter. Some lodges were closed due to storm damage, complicating witness follow-up. James Delaney spent most of his time rereading statements, comparing them with weather logs and vehicle movements on the night of December 31st, but found no new inconsistencies. He had hoped the Anchorage results would open a direction, but the dry lines of the final report left everything at a dead end. On March 15th, Delaney met with the regional commander to summarize progress. The official report had 4 points. 1. Victim not located. 2. No confirmed suspect. 3. Insufficient evidence to classify as criminal case. 4. Recommend suspension of active field investigation until new information emerges. After the meeting, he returned to his desk and opened the evidence box, the silver necklace, purple fabric scrap, child's mitten. Everything carefully sealed in cold storage, yet to him now just meaningless objects among hundreds of unresolved files. In his notebook he wrote, "No traces, no explanation, only cold emptiness." At the end of that month, the Kenai Chief of Police signed the order suspending investigation, moving File 08KH12 to long-term storage and labeling it Cold Case. A copy was sent to Anchorage for the statewide database. The day the notice arrived, Delaney stared at the red stamped paper, feeling the same weight as the snow outside pressing on his shoulders. He knew that once a file entered this category, the chance of reopening was almost zero unless something extraordinary surfaced. Weeks later, the Harrison family packed up and moved to Anchorage. The log house, where Kara vanished, was temporarily sealed, then returned to the owner. Neighbors rarely mentioned the case anymore. Everyone seemed to want to forget that winter. The last time Delaney drove past, he saw the small sign in front of the house, leaning in the wind, its white painted letters blurred under thin ice. He stopped the vehicle and wrote the final duty log entry for the investigation phase. Kara Harrison case suspended, no new data, reopen when conditions permit. Then he closed the notebook, started the engine, and drove away down the long, straight, snow-covered road, leaving behind a silent house and an unanswered disappearance. 10 years passed since File 08KH12 was closed. The Kara Harrison case gradually faded from the memory of Kenai residents, surviving only in the Alaska State Police archives. In April 2018, Lauren Pike, a 29-year-old freelance reporter living in Anchorage, began a project titled The Vanished North, a series on unsolved disappearances across Alaska. She requested the state archives list of cold cases from 1990 to 2010, filtered more than 30 unresolved files, and noticed the name Kara Harrison. While skimming the summary, the lined snow sample suspected blood, DNA undetermined, and the notation Exhibit #4 caught her attention. She checked the case code and saw that the biological data had never been entered into CODIS, the national DNA database, unlike most other files. That detail intrigued her. After a few days of research, she learned the original lead investigator was James Delaney, now retired, and living on the outskirts of Soldotna, about 250 kilometers from Anchorage. She emailed him, introduced her project, and requested an interview about the 2008-2009 investigation. Delaney replied briefly, "There's nothing left to say about that one, but if you want to see the file, I still have a copy." 2 weeks later, Lauren drove to meet him at his small log house beside the Kenai River. On his old desk sat a brown folder labeled 08KH12 with a closed 2009 sticker. Delaney opened it, seen photos, lab reports, interview transcripts, and a few evidence bags whose seals had long expired. When she asked about the blood sample mentioned in the records, he flipped to the last page and found his own handwritten note. Insufficient quantity for testing in 2009, stored frozen. He sighed and explained that at the time the state's DNA technology was limited. The sample was heavily contaminated and was simply archived. Lauren asked to view the electronic file. Using his computer, she accessed the internal database and confirmed that Exhibit #4 had never been uploaded to CODIS. The status read pending, not processed. She took notes and cross-checked current regulations, since 2017 states were authorized to use next-generation sequencing capable of analyzing trace or heavily degraded samples. Delaney stared silently at the screen, then said quietly that maybe it was time to try again. He opened a drawer, pulled out a clear plastic bag containing the snow sample collected in 2008. Now, just a small frozen lump in a test tube. Despite the years, the Kenai cold storage conditions had kept it stable. Lauren photographed it, recorded the seal number, and proposed resubmitting it to the Anchorage Crime Lab, which now had federally funded NGS equipment. Delaney thought for a moment, then signed the request for supplemental analysis as the original investigator. At the end of the visit, she set her recorder on the table and asked if he believed the case still had a chance of being solved. Delaney looked out the snow-dusted window and answered that he didn't know, but as long as the sample exists, there's still a possibility. When Lauren left the house, light snow had begun to fall. In her trunk was the signed authorization to retest the evidence, the first step toward reopening the Kara Harrison disappearance after 10 forgotten years. In May 2019, the ice breakup came earlier than usual in Kenai. Along the riverbank, where the thick winter ice had begun cracking into large slabs, a crew from the Alaska Department of Transportation was mobilized to clear mud and inspect the new bridge pilings. On the morning of the 12th, while operating an excavator near the old wooden bridge, a worker named Miguel Alvarez spotted something protruding from a broken ice chunk. At first he thought it was a log, but when the bucket flipped it over, mud spread and revealed the clear shape of a long yellowish ivory bone segment. Miguel immediately stopped the machine, signaled his co-workers, and reported it to the local police. Less than an hour later, the Kenai forensic team and the scene investigator arrived, cordoning off the area within a 50-meter radius. Specialists used specialized tools to pry away the ice, gradually uncovering more small bone fragments and pieces of rotted wool fabric. By the end of the afternoon, they had recovered nearly 30 bone pieces and a pale purple fabric swatch. Everything was sealed and immediately transferred to the Anchorage Medical Examiner's office for analysis. News of the discovery spread quickly, since the location was less than 2 kilometers from where the command post for the 2008 Kara Harrison disappearance had once stood. James Delaney, now retired, received a call from the Kenai Police Department asking him to come confirm the scene. He arrived that evening and stood watching the river as chunks of ice melted away, muddy water swirling around the floating blocks. The sight left him silent for a long time. He understood that what they had just found might finally put an end to the question that had hung unanswered for 10 years. 3 days later, the Anchorage Medical Examiner's office released preliminary results. The bone samples matched Kara Harrison's dental records perfectly, the girl who vanished on New Year's Eve 2008. The report also noted that the recovered purple fabric still contained trace amounts of dried blood and epithelial cells sufficient for DNA extraction. The primary sample was compared against the old evidence locker profile. The genetic sequence matched blood sample #4 that had been retested at the request of Lauren Pike and Delaney. However, when the system ran a comparison against the National CODIS database, the software flagged an additional secondary DNA sequence that had never appeared in the original file. That sequence matched the profile of Thomas Selden, who had been questioned in 2009 and was currently serving time in a Missouri state prison for armed assault. The results were rushed to Alaska State Troopers headquarters, along with the newly declassified full 08KH12 case file. Within 24 hours, the agency issued an internal bulletin confirming the discovery of the victim's remains and authorizing the reopening of the investigation. A task force was formed consisting of Anchorage Forensics, a CODIS representative, and the Kenai Regional Investigative Unit. Delaney was invited back as a technical consultant because he knew the entire original scene structure and timeline. When he signed the assignment sheet, the brown case folder, labeled 08KH12, was placed on the desk again. Just like 10 years earlier, only this time it came with new evidence. A DNA sequence matching the man he had suspected from the very beginning. At the Kenai Discovery Site, tents were erected and the area temporarily sealed so forensic archaeologists could complete the excavation. Local police set up barriers along the riverbank to keep curious onlookers and reporters away. In the reopened investigation report, the final line read, "Physical evidence confirms victim identity Kara Harrison, linked to subject Thomas Selden, Alaska State Troopers, reopening investigation. Case number remains 08KH12. After the forensic results confirmed Kara Harrison's DNA and revealed the match with Thomas Selden, the Alaska State Police decided to re-establish the cold case unit, the special unit responsible for backlogged cases. The old room at the Kenai station was cleaned out, the map board was rehung, and case 08KH12 became the first on the reopened list. James Delaney, who had led the original investigation 10 years earlier, was officially invited back as an investigative consultant. He accepted the assignment and joined a 6-person team that included 2 forensic investigators, 1 digital data specialist, 1 GPS analyst, and 2 younger officers handling personnel files. The first meeting took place in Anchorage at the end of May 2019. The initial objective was clearly defined: reconstruct Thomas Selden's complete movements in the days before and after the disappearance, and cross-reference them with the new data obtained from CODIS. The data team began by pulling Selden's employment records from the power company he had contracted with, Northern Grid Maintenance, the contractor responsible for generator maintenance in the Kenai area in 2008. Electronic archives showed Selden had been assigned to 4 locations between December 27 and 31, including a job at the Harrison residence on December 29. The work order receipts were fully signed, and Mark Harrison's signature still appeared on the copies. The tech team determined his route using the old GPS units the company required employees to use in their RVs. Although the official 2008 data had been deleted, the telecom provider's backup servers still retained the raw coordinate packets. By recovering them from the old servers, the technician reconstructed the travel map on the night of December 31. The GPS signal from the RV with plate 3KNZ left the parking lot at 2117, stopped near the Harrison neighborhood at 2212, remained there for over 40 minutes, then continued north across the Kenai River Bridge. That timeline matched perfectly with neighbors' statements about truck headlights appearing before midnight. Delaney reviewed the map and asked for a cross-check with fuel records, a receipt from a gas station 14 kilometers outside Kenai. Showed Selden fueling up early on the morning of January 1st, the same time he had previously claimed he left town to avoid the storm. At the same time, the personnel team re-examined his residency and employment records. On paper, Selden left Alaska on January 2nd, transferred to a job in Fairbanks for a week, then temporarily crossed into Canada for 3 months before disappearing from state records until his arrest in Missouri in 2010. The travel data, employment records, and GPS results all placed him in Kenai at the exact time Kara vanished. Delaney and the forensics team compared the GPS coordinates with the 2008 topographic maps and determined the distance from the RV stop to the Harrison's back door was only about 120 meters, easily walkable in a few minutes. The analysis report was completed in the first week and concluded clearly Thomas Selden was present at the crime scene during the window of the disappearance. When all the data was printed and pinned to the board, the red dots on the map formed a single travel route from the parking lot to the Harrison house to the Kenai River Bridge. Closed within a 2-hour window, Delaney stood silently in front of the map board, feeling the cold air from the AC blowing exactly like it had 10 years earlier. He knew these numbers had, for the first time, turned his old hunch into real evidence. In August 2019, after the Special Task Force finished confirming Thomas Selden's route and location on the night of the disappearance, Alaska State Troopers sent an official request to the Missouri State Prison for a direct interrogation. Selden was then serving a 15-year sentence for armed assault at the Jefferson City Correctional Center. A 2-person team, Detectives Daniel Moore and Kara Jensen, was dispatched, carrying the fully reconstructed file, GPS maps, crime scene photos, forensic reports, and an authorization to take a statement signed by the Alaska State Prosecutor's Office. On the morning of August 17th, they entered the interview room in the high-security isolation wing. Selden was brought in wearing a prisoner ID around his neck and still bearing restraint marks on his wrists. He was thinner than in the old photos, his hair gray and thinning, but his eyes remained cold and alert. After reading him his federal rights, the interrogation began. Moore opened by explaining why an Alaska team was there, the reopened investigation into Kara Harrison's 2008 disappearance, and the new DNA results that matched his biological profile. Selden sat motionless, his expression indifferent, then gave a faint smile and said, "DNA doesn't mean anything if you can't put me there." When asked about his movements on the night of December 31st, he repeated the same story he had given 10 years earlier: left Kenai early, slept in the RV at a rest stop up north. Moore placed the GPS tracking map with timestamps in front of him and pointed to the stop near the Harrison house. Selden glanced at it for a few seconds, shrugged, and said it was probably a signal glitch or someone borrowed the rig. However, when Jensen asked why the vehicle then showed up at the Kenai Bridge exactly where the body was later found, he hesitated slightly before answering, "I worked all around there, the data must be mixed up." For the first 3 hours, Selden stayed guarded, giving short answers and avoiding specifics. When Moore mentioned the silver necklace engraved with KH, Selden turned his head, narrowed his eyes and blurted, "That one has a heart on it, right?" Both detectives froze. That detail had never been released to the public. Jensen asked how he knew. Selden claimed he read it in the paper, but Moore confirmed no newspaper had ever published a photo of the pendant. From that point, the entire interrogation was recorded, and the detectives switched to cross-examination mode. They went through point after point where his statements matched the scene, the time the power went out, wind direction, the position of the open back door, details only someone present could know. Under pressure, Selden grew impatient, slammed the table, and shouted, "I didn't kill anybody, I just went there to check the generator. The kid woke up and scared me." Jensen immediately asked, "Which kid?" He bit his lip and went silent. The room fell completely still, except for the soft whir of the recorder. The session lasted nearly 2 more hours, during which Selden kept switching between denial and excuses. When asked one final time why he left Kenai at dawn the next day, he only said, "Because I didn't want to get stuck there." Everything he said was recorded, backed up in triplicate, and signed off with a Missouri representative present as witness. After the interview, Moore and Jensen left the prison with the shared impression that he knew far more than he had admitted. At their temporary office in Jefferson City, they prepared the formal report, copied the audio, and extracted transcripts of every statement Selden made that related to evidence, especially the heart-shaped necklace detail. The package was sent securely through internal channels back to Alaska, along with a behavioral analysis report prepared by the consulting psychologist. 1 week later, the Alaska State Prosecutor's Office received the recording and all supplemental data. The attached report ended with the line, "Subject's statements demonstrate knowledge of undisclosed evidence and scene-specific details sufficient to serve as preliminary prosecutorial evidence." After the Missouri interrogation, the recording and all collected data were sent to Anchorage for detailed specialist analysis. While the Special Task Force processed Selden's statements, Lauren Pike, the person who had initiated the case review, continued hunting for additional technical data to strengthen the evidence. She focused on the GPS system that Northern Grid Maintenance had installed in its service vehicles in 2008 basic positioning units that still transmitted data via commercial satellite networks. After more than a week of contacting the former provider in Seattle, Lauren was granted access to their long-term data archive, now stored on magnetic tape backups. With help from the investigation team's IT specialist, she filtered for the signal group matching the device ID tied to Thomas Selden's RV plate 3KNZ. Recovery took several days because the data was compressed and in an obsolete format. When decoding succeeded, a continuous coordinate string appeared on screen covering December 29, 2008 through January 1, 2009. Lauren and the technician overlaid the data onto current geographic maps and saw the clear route. The RV left the lot at 2117, stopped in the Harrison neighborhood at 2210, then continued to the Kenai Bridge at 2304, remained there 26 minutes, and then lost signal. The timestamps matched perfectly with the 45-minute gap Delaney had identified in the original 2008 timeline. She printed the map and sent copies to Delaney and the cold case team. Delaney reviewed it and concluded this was the first direct positioning evidence tying Selden to both locations, the victim's home and the body recovery site. To ensure legal admissibility, Lauren submitted a data authentication request to the FBI Digital Forensics Lab in Denver, the unit responsible for verifying GPS information in federal criminal cases. The full original positioning files plus checksums were backed up and transmitted through secure channels. Nearly 3 weeks later, the FBI report came back to Anchorage, confirming the recovered data was accurate, original, untampered, and recorded in real time by the Inmarsat satellite positioning system. The report also included a detailed travel graph showing the Kenai Bridge stop within a 5-meter margin of error, exactly matching the spot where workers discovered the remains in May 2019. The FBI software further noted that at the moment signal was lost, the vehicle's GPS unit was still functioning normally, meaning the disappearance was most likely due to the device being manually switched off or disconnected from power. Lauren cross-referenced this with the 2009 RV search report, where technicians had noted the GPS power plug had been removed. The pieces formed a clear logical chain. Selden was at the Harrison house on the night of December 31st, left, stopped at the Kenai Bridge less than an hour later, and deliberately disabled the tracking unit. The GPS analysis report was compiled into a nearly 100-page document, signed by the FBI representative, and delivered to the Special Task Force. Delaney read the final version, underlined 2 key sections in red, and wrote in his log, "Authenticated positioning, Kenai Bridge. Full 2008 timeline match." The data was then added to case file 08KH12 under the heading Electronic Evidence, Original GPS, federally authenticated. After the GPS data verification results from the FBI were transferred to Anchorage, the Special Investigation Team, in coordination with the Alaska State Crime Lab, requested a complete re-examination of all evidence seized in 2009, including the pair of black leather gloves confiscated from Thomas Selden's RV. The item had been stored in cold storage for over 10 years, seals intact. Evidence number 08KH12G3, under the supervision of a prosecutor's representative, forensic technician Eleanor Voss, personally opened the bag following sterile protocol and used a scanning electron microscope to search the surface for any remaining biological microparticles. The leather had dried and darkened, but the stitching grooves still retained fine dust and tiny impurities. While scanning the right fingertip area, Voss discovered a small cluster of fibers mixed with red particles smaller than 1 mm. The sample was isolated, placed in a centrifuge tube, and analyzed using next-generation sequencing, a technique capable of identifying heavily degraded DNA. After 48 hours, the lab's automated system displayed the results. The recovered sample contained a genetic sequence that matched 100% with the DNA profile of victim Kara Harrison, which had been entered into the CODIS database from the 2019 skeletal remains examination. The report stated clearly, victim's blood microparticles detected on the right glove of subject Selden, probability of random match 1 in 4.8 trillion. Additionally, the forensic team extracted a second DNA sample from the inner surface of the glove that matched Thomas Selden's own biological profile exactly, confirming the item had been worn directly by him. The results were cross-verified using two methods, fluorescence spectroscopy and classical PCR, both yielding absolute matches. The comprehensive 47-page report, stamped and signed by the Anchorage Crime Lab director, was sent directly to the Special Investigation Team to be added to File 08KH12. James Delaney read every line of the conclusion, cross-referencing it with the GPS data and the Missouri interview transcript, and saw that the chain of evidence was now complete. Selden was present at the scene, left in the direction of the Kenai Bridge, and physical evidence bearing the victim's blood was found in his vehicle. Delaney drafted a memorandum recommending the case move from investigation to prosecution and forwarded it, along with all forensic results, to the Alaska State Prosecutor's Office. On September 9, 2019, Prosecutor Rebecca Laird signed the notice accepting the file, formally beginning the pre-prosecution review process. In the official document, she wrote, "DNA results confirm the victim's presence on the personal property of subject Thomas Selden. The evidence meets federal criminal standards and provides sufficient legal grounds to proceed with first-degree criminal prosecution." File 08KH12 was moved to active prosecution file, ending its 10-year status as a cold case and entering the litigation phase. Once File 08KH12 was officially transferred to prosecution status, the Alaska State Prosecutor's Office in Anchorage began building the criminal case under first-degree procedures. Lead prosecutor Rebecca Laird headed the team, working directly with the Special Investigation Unit, the Anchorage Crime Lab, and the FBI's digital unit to compile every piece of evidence. The first goal was to confirm a complete, gap-free chain of evidence, physical items, witnesses, electronic data, GPS records, and DNA results. In internal meetings, each source was reviewed independently. The forensics team presented the blood microparticle match on the glove. The tech team confirmed the original 2008 GPS data had been authenticated by the FBI. The digital evidence unit submitted the RV travel route report that aligned with the time frame of headlights witnessed by neighbors. Finally, the investigation team provided the Missouri interrogation transcript, proving the subject knew details of the scene that had never been released. Taken together, they formed a unified chain of evidence that allowed the prosecution to draft a comprehensive indictment. In addition, the prosecutor's office contacted the Harrison family to prepare witnesses. Krista Harris, the victim's younger sister, now 22 years old, was asked to return to Anchorage to testify. She had been the last person to see Kara alive that night. In their first meeting, Krista appeared calm but guarded. She spoke little, mostly listening and taking notes on what the prosecutor explained. Rebecca Laird outlined the witness process. Krista's testimony would help the court understand the family circumstances, the sisters' relationship, and the context of the disappearance. At the same time, the forensic team prepared technical reconstructions, a 3D forensic model of the crime scene for trial presentation. Using 2008 Kenai topography maps, RV GPS data, and the 2019 excavation results, the entire spatial model was rebuilt. The Harrison home, the Forest Road, and the Kenai Bridge location where the remains were found. The model displayed Selden's movement direction, vehicle stop times, distances to the scene, and the timeline of events with precise timestamps. In a closed-door meeting, Delaney and the tech team reviewed the first render, the reconstructed scene under virtual snow, simulated headlights, and reflective ice tracks, all matching the GPS data and neighbor statements. The accompanying analysis report was printed with sequentially numbered evidence markers. Rebecca Laird instructed the forensics team to add side-by-side comparisons of real evidence photos and the 3D render for courtroom display. Simultaneously, the administrative unit prepared the main witness list: James Delaney, Lauren Pike, Krista Harris, forensic specialist Eleanor Voss, and the FBI representative responsible for GPS authentication. 5 key witnesses confirmed in total. In the summary document submitted to the Anchorage Superior Court, Prosecutor Laird stated that the independent chains of physical, technical, and testimonial evidence all lead to a single conclusion: Thomas Selden's presence and actions at the scene caused the death of Kara Harrison. The indictment, exceeding 200 pages, was finalized in October 2019, accompanied by full appendices of photographs, location diagrams, and the 3D model stored on a dedicated drive. Before filing, Laird held a final meeting with the investigation team. Delaney presented the consolidated timeline from the night of the disappearance to the body recovery, confirming no data conflicts. Lauren Pike added commentary on next-generation DNA technology and how the old blood sample had reopened the investigation. Krista Harris agreed to sign the witness statement, confirming her account of the last evening her sister was home. Finally, File 08KH12 was sealed with the red stamp, ready for prosecution. That late afternoon, Delaney stood by the window overlooking the headquarters courtyard, where the season's first snow had begun to fall. 11 years after the night Kara vanished, every piece of evidence was now united in a single file, ready to enter the decisive phase of the case he had never stopped thinking about. In June 2020, after more than a year of file preparation and completion of all legal procedures, the Federal District Court in Anchorage officially opened the trial of State of Alaska v. Thomas Selden, case number 08KH12. The large courtroom was arranged with high-security protocol, attended by the full prosecution team, a 12-person jury, court-appointed defense, witnesses, and technical experts. In the front row, lead prosecutor Rebecca Laird delivered the opening statement by recounting the 12-year investigation from the 2008 disappearance to the 2019 discovery of remains. She introduced the core evidence in sequence: the silver necklace engraved K8, the DNA sample extracted from the glove recovered in the RV, GPS data confirming Selden's travel route, and the Missouri statement showing his knowledge of an undisclosed evidence detail. The jury received a 36-page summary packet with large-format timeline charts and travel maps hung in the courtroom. When Rebecca displayed the 3D crime scene reconstruction, the lights dimmed and the screen showed the Harrison home and the snow-covered forest road. GPS markers appeared clearly: 2210, vehicle stopped in the Harrison neighborhood; 2304, vehicle moved toward Kenai Bridge; 2330, signal terminated. The recorded Missouri interrogation played through the speakers, Selden's slow, dry voice saying, "It had a heart on it, right?" silencing the room. After presenting the evidence, the prosecution called James Delaney as the first witness. He described the initial investigation, how small clues led to reopening the file, and confirmed that both GPS and DNA results matched the hypothesized route taken by Selden. Next, Eleanor Voss explained the glove examination process, detailing the blood microparticle analysis, extraction, and genetic matching. Lauren Pike followed, recounting the discovery of the blood sample not previously entered into CODIS and the retesting process, describing how next-generation DNA technology enabled recovery of old samples. Finally, Krista Harris, representing the family, testified about the power outage that night, her sister going outside to see the snow, and finding the back door wide open the next morning. Meanwhile, the defense, led by attorney Grant Nichols, argued that the evidence was entirely circumstantial, failed to prove intent to kill, and that the DNA could have transferred to the glove during generator maintenance. Nichols moved to exclude the Missouri recording as leading, but Judge Howard Reeve denied the motion, noting the interview had witnesses and was legally recorded. In rebuttal, Rebecca Laird emphasized the interconnection of independent evidence streams, GPS data, blood-stained evidence, and detailed knowledge of undisclosed facts. She concluded that coincidence cannot simultaneously appear in 4 separate evidence sources. The jury followed the data closely, taking detailed notes on the charts. In subsequent sessions, FBI experts presented the GPS authentication report, confirming positional error under 5 meters. Anchorage lab experts affirmed the DNA chain could not be random, and telecommunications technicians proved the GPS signal was manually disabled rather than lost due to equipment failure. When given the chance to speak in his own defense, Selden, wearing prison coveralls and closely cropped hair, stood and stated he was just doing his job and never saw the girl again after leaving. His voice was steady and emotionless. The jury watched intently. A few exchanged glances, but showed no reaction. Rebecca asked if he remembered stopping at the Kenai Bridge. He paused several seconds, then replied, "Not sure, I was asleep." The prosecution displayed the GPS map again, the red arrow frozen at the bridge. The courtroom fell completely silent. The judge ended the questioning. After nearly 2 weeks of continuous trial, as closing arguments concluded and the jury prepared to deliberate, Thomas Selden suddenly requested a private meeting with his attorney and prosecutor, Rebecca Laird. An emergency session was held that afternoon, attended by Judge Howard Reeve and a representative from the prosecutor's office. Selden, in orange prison coveralls, sat silently for several minutes before saying he wanted to correct some wrong details from his earlier statements. The judge confirmed he was lucid and agreed to record the entire session. Rebecca Laird began by asking if he wished to change his courtroom testimony. Selden nodded slowly, his voice hoarse from days of silence. He stated that on the night of December 31st, 2008, he went to the Harrison house under the pretext of checking the generator, but actually just to find temporary shelter from the storm. When he found the back door ajar, he entered, thinking no one was home. Kara woke up, saw a stranger, and screamed. Selden said he tried to cover her mouth, but during the struggle she fell, struck her head on the corner of a table, and began bleeding. Panicked and afraid of being caught, he carried her outside, placed her in the RV, and drove toward the Kenai Bridge. There, she was still breathing weakly, but he didn't know what to do except leave her on the ice and drive away. He said, "When I left, the girl was still alive." The room was silent. Rebecca asked him to describe the exact location. He precisely detailed the distance from the bridge to the tree line and the glove dropped on the flat rock by the bank. Every detail matched the 2019 excavation site and recovered evidence. When asked why he hadn't said this from the beginning, Selden replied, "No one would have believed me, and I didn't want to spend more time in prison." The statement was recorded, 3 copies made, and signed by both the prosecutor and the judge. In the official report, Rebecca wrote, "Subject admits removing the victim from the home and directly causing injuries, leading to unintentional death, conduct containing all elements of first-degree murder." The following day, the trial resumed publicly with the supplemental statement. Selden sat in the defendant's box, face pale as the recording played for the court. His voice shook, but was clear. "I didn't mean to kill her. I just wanted her to be quiet. It all happened too fast." Some in the gallery lowered their heads. Krista Harris cried silently. When the recording ended, Rebecca stepped forward, emphasizing that although Selden described the incident as an accident, the unlawful entry, use of force against a minor, and removal of the body from the scene constituted intentional murder. She cited Alaska criminal statutes regarding death caused during commission of a serious felony, stating the charge could not be reduced. Defense attorney Grant Nichols attempted to argue the statement showed lack of intent to kill, but the jury now had the full chain of physical evidence, DNA, GPS data, and a direct admission. After 3 hours of deliberation, they returned to the courtroom in silence. Judge Reeve asked the foreperson for the verdict. The middle-aged man stood, holding a folded sheet, and read slowly. The jury unanimously finds the defendant, Thomas Selden, guilty of kidnapping and first-degree murder. Sentence, life imprisonment without possibility of parole, to be served at the maximum security facility of the state of Alaska. Verdict effective immediately. The gavel struck 3 times, sharp and final. Selden stood motionless, staring straight ahead, showing no reaction. 2 officers approached to escort him out. His figure disappeared behind the heavy metal door. In the gallery below, Krista Harris clutched her mother's hand, tears rolling down her cheeks without a sound. Rebecca Laird gathered the files and placed the final report stamped "Case Closed" on the judge's bench. James Delaney, who had pursued the case from the very first day, stood at the back of the public gallery, eyes fixed on the sealed evidence box on the prosecution table. The silver necklace engraved KH resting quietly under protective glass. As the sentencing session ended and people filed out, only the harsh white lights remained shining on the empty benches. Delaney stepped forward and signed the case transfer log. Kara Harrison case, file 08KH12, prosecution completed, sentenced June 22, 2020. 12 years of investigation from the Kenai ICE to the Anchorage courtroom were finally closed. The life sentence handed down to Thomas Selden quickly sent shockwaves through the Kenai community, where most residents still remembered him as a quiet technician who often helped fix generators during blizzard seasons. Television stations in Anchorage and Fairbanks broke the news that same evening with banner headlines. The 2008 disappearance perpetrator lived among us. Many locals expressed anger mixed with disbelief that the man who used to drink coffee with them at the little diner on Main Street was responsible for the crime that had haunted the town for over a decade. Newspapers reprinted old photos of a younger Selden with a gentle face and awkward smile next to his 2020 mugshot, showing hollow, cold eyes. In the days following the verdict, Kenai residents spontaneously organized a small memorial on the riverbank where Kara's body had been found. More than 100 people brought white flowers and candles, forming a circle around a wooden plaque bearing the girl's name. Krista Harris stood silently in the crowd beside James Delaney and prosecutor Rebecca Laird. The atmosphere was somber, broken only by wind across the river and the flickering reflection of candles on the thin remaining ice. Media described the ceremony as the community's belated but necessary goodbye to the victim. Meanwhile, in Anchorage, the Alaska State Police held a press conference releasing an internal report on early investigative errors, admitting that in 2009 crime scene processing and evidence management had not met standards. Some items were warehoused without being entered into CODIS, causing the critical DNA chain to be overlooked. The department director told the press, "The Kara Harrison case has completely changed how we approach investigations in deep, cold regions. Weather may bury evidence, but it cannot bury responsibility." The 68-page report, released publicly, detailed every procedural failure from preservation to database delays. At the same time, a series of reforms were adopted: creation of the Alaska Forensic Review Unit, specialized training for evidence handling in ice and snow environments, and a mandate that all units re-examine cold cases pending over 10 years. In Kenai, residents said the verdict not only delivered justice to the Harrison family, but also reopened painful memories of the years the town lived under fear and suspicion. The diner Selden used to frequent closed for a week in mourning, while the local church hung purple ribbons, the color of Kara's sweater, on the main street lamps. Area schools held community safety talks, inviting police and journalist Lauren Pike to speak about evidence preservation and new DNA technology. Former neighbors of the Harrisons, re-interviewed by media, admitted they still felt haunted passing the old road. Krista, in a brief interview with the Anchorage Daily News, said she felt no joy, only that finally the truth has been acknowledged. In the closing segment of the evening news, Lauren Pike read the opening of her new investigative series, writing that a frozen town stayed silent for 12 years, and that silence was harder to break than the ice on the Kenai River. That night, the lights on the Kenai Bridge glowed gold as always, reflecting on the thawing water where this small community had finally found a measure of peace after a long storm of memories. In late July 2020, 1 month after the final verdict took effect, Lauren Pike published an investigative series titled "The Girl Beneath the Ice" in a special section of the Anchorage Daily News. The piece opened with an image of the Kenai River during spring thaw, murky water swirling around the last chunks of ice, serving as a metaphor for the layer of truth that had just been uncovered. Over 4 consecutive installments, Lauren laid out the entire case-breaking process from 2008 to 2020, the initial mistakes, the years the file gathered dust, and the moment next-generation DNA technology dragged the case back into the light. She described how a tiny snow sample stored for over a decade became the key that reopened everything, and how multiple agencies, from the Alaska Cold Case Unit to the Anchorage Crime Lab and the FBI in Denver, worked together to close the circle of evidence. The series drew millions of reads, was widely quoted by national magazines, and earned a Pulitzer Prize nomination in local reporting. Lauren became the face of the Truth in the North initiative, highlighting the role of journalism in holding the justice system accountable. At the same time, James Delaney, now fully retired, spent the entire summer of 2020 finalizing his comprehensive report on cold region forensic procedures, a document he had been drafting throughout the reinvestigation. The report ran over 150 pages and analyzed in detail the factors affecting evidence collection and preservation in sub-zero environments, how ice and snow alter microbial structures, sampling methods in frozen conditions, and long-term DNA storage protocols. He proposed a unified statewide evidence numbering system, a new frozen sample category in the forensic database, and the creation of a dedicated cold region investigation training center. The Alaska Department of Law accepted the report and made it required reading for local investigative units. In August, Delaney attended the National Forensic Conference in Anchorage and presented a paper titled Cold Truths: Lessons from the Kenai River Case. The presentation drew major attention, not only for its technical depth, but also for its human significance. A case once thought buried forever had become the foundation for future reforms. When summer ended, Delaney returned to Kenai, stopped by the storage room, where file 08KH12 now sat in its own cabinet stamped closed. 2020 opened his old notebook and wrote the final line: investigation concluded. The evidence has spoken for itself. In Anchorage, Lauren submitted the last article of the series, closing 12 years of events with a single short sentence. Kara Harrison, the girl beneath the ice, has finally been found. In early September 2020, as autumn began turning the pines along the Kenai River gold, the Harrison family returned to the town they had left 12 years earlier to attend Kara's final memorial service. The little town had changed a lot, but the old log house still stood quietly on the moss-covered slope. The ceremony took place on the riverbank, exactly where the remains had been discovered, with more than 200 townspeople, police officers, investigators, reporters, and representatives from the Alaska Attorney General's office in attendance. Krista Harris placed a bouquet of white flowers on the ground beside the new stone marker engraved, Kara Harrison, 1995. 2008. The river kept her secret, but the truth returned. Her mother, Evelyn, held her husband's hand, eyes red as she watched the water drift slowly past the thin remnants of last winter's ice. James Delaney stood a few steps away, holding the final version of the report he had just submitted to the Kenai Police Department. He handed the chief the file marked 08KH12, stamped in red, closed, officially ending the case after more than 12 years. The chief read the closing statement, confirming that all physical evidence had been transferred to the Central Archive in Anchorage, and that Kara Harrison's file would be reclassified under solved cold case. Cases cracked, thanks to next-generation forensic technology. In a press release issued the same day, the Alaska Department of Law noted that this was one of the state's first cold cases resolved entirely through NGS DNA technology, ushering in a new era for investigations in frozen regions. Local and national media covered the story extensively, calling the Kara Harrison case a milestone in the transition from traditional detective work to modern forensic science. At the memorial, prosecutor Rebecca Laird delivered brief remarks on behalf of the state, stressing that the patience and faith of this community turned justice into reality. Afterward, Delaney and Lauren Pike walked together along the riverbank, where almost all the ice had melted, only a few broken white fragments still floating downstream. Lauren asked if he planned to keep working. Delaney smiled and said he had done enough. Now he just wanted to pass his experience on to the next generation. On the way home, Krista looked back at the Kenai River one last time. In the fading sunset, the water reflected the reddish-orange sky, and the stone markers stood out against the green grass. She bowed her head slightly, placed her hand on the stone, and whispered a few words only she could hear. That night at Kenai Police Headquarters, Delaney signed the final line of the handover log, Kara Harrison case, completed. All evidence preserved permanently. The lights in the storage room went out one by one. The last glow fell across the words "Cold Case Solved, Alaska State Troopers." Outside, the first cold autumn wind blew across the river, the water lapping gently against the rocks. The story that had stretched more than 12 years came full circle and closed where it began. In the small town of Kenai, Alaska, where snow can hide every trace, but justice eventually finds its way back. The Kara Harrison case in Kenai, Alaska, is not just the journey of solving a 12-year-old forgotten crime. It is also a mirror reflecting deeper issues in contemporary American society: the limitations of the justice system, the role of technology, and the community's responsibility in pursuing justice. In this case, without the young journalist Lauren Pike persistently digging through records or the application of next-generation DNA technology, the truth might have remained buried under the ice, like so many other missing persons cases. This shows that in today's America, where massive amounts of information can cause small cries for help to be overlooked, maintaining trust in the legal system and the transparency of journalism is critically important. The cooperation among journalists, investigators, and forensic science proves that justice is not merely an ideal. It is the result of persistence and collaboration. James Delaney, the veteran investigator, represents the spirit of never giving up, even when the system once failed. Lauren represents the new generation willing to question the past in order to fix the future. In today's United States, where public trust in government institutions sometimes wavers, the Kara Harrison story reminds us not to view cold cases as failures, but as reminders of human limitations and second chances for justice. The lesson is clear. Every citizen, whether a journalist, a lab technician, or an ordinary neighbor, can help uncover the truth through concern, small actions, or simply refusing to let stories sink into silence. Thank you for following the story of the Kara Harrison case, a 12-year journey to find justice amid Alaska's frozen wilderness. Please subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring real cases together that have changed how America views justice and humanity.